Hey, good morning.
Right.
Welcome everyone, and we'll still have some folks trickling in. But thanks so much for joining us. We're very excited to be here with Stellar today, trailblazers in the AI industry. So we are lucky enough to be joined by Brett and Morgan. Alvin's going to be leading us today through a whole bunch of exciting topics. And answering some questions that have been submitted by folks as well. So feel free to engage throughout. I will hand it over. Brett and Morgan, if you guys want to introduce yourselves, and then Alvin can take it away.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Brett Flinchum. I'm the CEO of Stellar. We've been fortunate to partner with Alvin on and OGx on a lot of kind of interesting business opportunities, both in the government space and in the enterprise data space. Stellar's a technology-enabled services company, so our vision is really bringing AI to government and large enterprise and helping them integrate it into their work streams and business processes. And we obviously think it's enormously sort of transformative technology and capabilities that have been emerging since really the chat GPT sort of break into the space late last year. And how do enterprises kind of apply that technology in transformative ways inside their organizations. So, we help people navigate this transformation. We have some technology underneath our kind of tech stack where we enable security, kind of safe use of AI and generative AI capabilities. And we're really excited to be here. So thank you, Alvin, for having us.
And hello, everyone. My name is Morgan Llewellyn. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Stellar. I've got about a 20-year background in the AI ML space, and then more recently in the generative AI space. We've been working with a lot of the components, as a team here at Stellar. Even though we're a relatively new company, we've all been in this space pretty long. We've been working together in various, kind of various organizations, and we've got multiple years of experience even in the generative AI space, even though it's relatively new, around some of the foundational technologies being used. And so why I'm really excited to be here today is we are seeing a real transformation, a real shift in the conversations around applications and usage of AI and AI strategy. And I'm really excited to kind of have an opportunity to talk with you, Alvin and Brett, around what we're seeing, what we think organizations need to do to be successful, and how to kind of guide people along that path. So thank you for having us, Alvin.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brett and Morgan. This is wonderful. So thanks again, Abby, for coordinating all of this. Without your leadership, I don't think we'll be in this position to be able to have this all-important conversation. So just before we kick it off, I would like to say, as Brett indicated, we've had the opportunity of working with Stellar over the past couple of months to be able to work on some large opportunities that are still in work. We have a couple of current contracts that we're looking to execute over the next few weeks here for us to start working on addressing some issues for some of the clients that we're currently engaged with. So it just became appropriate for us to have the next level of conversation, considering the fact that these guys, or these young men, I would like to say, happens to be thought leaders within this particular.
Very young.
Very young. That's right. So we wanted to be able to make sure that we have the relevant data points that we can certainly talk to. So it's going to be very conversational for those of you who will be participating. If you have questions, like Abby indicated, please feel free to drop your questions in here. We'll be happy to pick them up and move it forward. But the way this will be structured around, we'd like to look at the broad state of AI within the industry and the impacts today. We'll also want to look at things around ethics and responsibility. That is something that we all have heard. A lot of people have major concerns around. We'll talk about strategy and adoption. We also want to look at talent, because that's another big area again, and also training that will be applicable for those of you who might be looking at moving into this space. What will it take for you to get there? And the last but not the least will be around the future of AI. Where do we see this moving?
and how we can all get excited about this particular space that is significantly revolutionizing the way we work, the way we play, and the way we learn today. So that being said, would like to jump right in. So let's talk about the state of AI today. So Brett, I know you've had some experience there. From your perspective, how would you categorize the current state of AI in the US and the world today?
Well, I would start by calling it the wild, wild west, right? It's clearly, a space that we're reading about in the newspapers every day, and it's a topic that's top of mind. I'm going to focus on kind of enterprise and government applications for a second, and how I think some of the hype and the noise out there can disrupt us a little bit from what's really relevant, I think, for enterprise and government. So if I go there, if you look at it's sort of the traditional, and I'm gonna go deep here a little bit on sort of the data stack. And if you look at the traditional data stack, where it's been about relational databases, structured data, SQL queries, defined tables and schemas, ELT processes, and what I would call traditional analytics, dashboards, and traditional data science practices, right? There's kind of a world of the traditional data stack there. Then there's this, and I'm gonna focus on the hype piece a second, right? There's this hype element that's occurred with ChatGPT, which is kind of this enablement of large language models, enablement of unstructured data, and this notion of really of being able to creatively create kind of novel content, right, of what we're seeing in terms of whether that's anything from poetry to video to political ads to the things that are getting so much press and visibility today, from us from a day-to-day lifestyle perspective. And sometimes, and Alvin, this kind of goes to your question about what's the state of AI and this notion of the wild, wild west. I feel like there is so much hype about that second part there, and frankly, just a lot of misinformation out there. And there's some occasional bad actors, right, that influence the public perception of that space. But if what we're trying to do is to take that sort of new generative AI, natural language processing, and that disruption that's happening there, and go, how do we apply it to enterprise, government, and business that are largely living in that traditional data stack space that we just talked about? And I think the intersection of that is, and Morgan frequently uses these words, and I steal a lot of them from him, but is the transformation that happens by merging that sort of new capability with that traditional data stack. And it's incredibly enabling for businesses, enterprises, government. And if I start at the big picture a second, just the notion that it allows you to engage with your data in an entirely new way, right? It allows you to engage with your data using natural language, right? It allows you to engage with your data in multilingual capabilities. And so instead of looking at kind of stale dashboards, right, you can actually interact with your data, ask a very specific question of your data, and get a very specific answer back to that data without getting pointed to a dashboard that you have to go look at that's delayed and hasn't been populated, or getting directed to some internal HR documentation that you got to comb through 100 pages to find the thing you're looking for. The notion that, like we've become accustomed to in our personal life of interacting with our cars, of interacting with Siri or Alexa in different ways, where we can interact in natural language. Now businesses can actually interact with data in a similar way. And then I think the key element, and we'll get into this discussion further, but is for the enterprise, the further unique characteristic is really heightened data security, right? And data safety. If you've got, if your company has proprietary data about their product, if you have proprietary customer data, if you have proprietary healthcare data, how can you then take this new capability of large language models and generative AI, interact with that data, but not expose that data, right? And put customers and employees at risk. And that's the transformation that's happening. So I'll pause there. Morgan's got a lot of probably additional insights here. So
Yeah, so that's good, right? So one of the key things here that Morgan, if you can focus on, I know that Brett used the word transformative quite a bit. So what are the most transformative impacts you're seeing around AI today in various industries?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So various industries, and there's a lot of industries. And what's happening here, why is this such a transformative technology that we're seeing, is because it applies to a number of industries. It applies to everyone. Why? Because these, let's use large language models. The key word in there is language. And anywhere you have language in your business, anywhere you have language in your organization, these new technologies apply. And so it's very much it really is a watershed moment for AI, where we have this difference between the past, right? So I've been in the space 20 years. The past, we used to go very specific use cases, how do you develop a use case, to today, where now we've got this technology that broadly applies to many different things. And so we're seeing applications in a lot of different places. You see them with AI assistants. So in tech, anywhere where customers are interacting or citizens are interacting with your data, with your information, whether it be, could even be internal folks, right? Analysts. Anywhere where you're interacting with information, there's an opportunity for these technologies to help them find the right information a lot quicker in a more automated way. So that's one place where we're seeing it is around AI automation in a, kind of like a new and better chatbot. Right? So this isn't your classic chatbot. This is much more powerful and able to interact with you in a very, sophisticated way. So that's one place where we're seeing a lot of transformation. The other place we're seeing a lot of transformation, but also I think where we're just scratching the surface, is something that Brett referenced earlier, which is around unstructured data. So anywhere that you have unstructured data, and think in the government sector, think notes, anywhere you have case notes that have a lot of really rich and valuable information, but they've always been locked in case notes. Things like large language models can go summarize those case notes, identify what's important about them, and be able to surface those up to the right person at the right time. That's another place where we think there's a lot of opportunities still to be had, is just around the structure and organization of unstructured data. And then the third is really going to be in something that we think about is really the personalization of the customer and citizen journey. How do you personalize messages at an individual level? Yes, we've been doing this, there's, talk around like Salesforce, marketing journeys and things like that. But this is much more sophisticated, where you can give Morgan and Brett and Alvin all different messages that really speak to us and how we've interacted with your organization in the past. And so we see a lot of opportunity, still in this idea of how do you communicate with someone on a true one-to-one basis, where we're sending Alvin a very unique message that's different than what we're sending Morgan.
Excellent. So go
Alvin,
ahead.
I just wanted, but that's a great, description of those pieces. Just to share a couple of practical use cases that I think folks will enjoy, hearing some of the things we're working on. And this will be, by the way, and this gets to Morgan's point about, how horizontal the use cases are, right? I always kind of talk about what we do as being a horizontal platform. Fortunately, we're able to apply some vertical use case expertise in it, but in general, the platform applies really across across businesses, across industries, across government, across healthcare, across financial services, right? It's such a broad capability. But to give, some specific use cases that really get at what generative AI can unlock for the enterprise and for government. So we're doing actually several projects in what I'm going to call technician assistance. And I think it's super interesting because we're able, and this is Morgan's point about unstructured data, we're able to ingest, effectively libraries of product information, proprietary company product data and information, and then allow technicians in the field to ask a very specific question about that data and get a very specific answer to that, really enabling this notion of field technician capabilities. And what I think super cool about it, and we're doing one use case that's actually about its methane detection, and it's identifying methane leaks and then repairing and fixing methane leaks. But if you're a field technician and you can acquire and say, hey, I've located the leak, it's this particular valve type, what is this set of procedures I need to do for that specific, and query the company records and data, and then get very specific answers to your question. By the way, where you're not risking this notion of hallucination that we read and hear a lot about, because we're focused on proprietary data and really extracting valuable information from the company's proprietary data. But then, Alvin, the key thing, and this is Morgan's point about natural language, think about this, that you can also respond to that in multi-languages, right? So from a workforce management, for the folks managing these distributed field techs, all of a sudden, you can communicate in various languages that help you broaden your tech support capabilities, broaden your base of employees, eliminate some of your constraints on labor supply. So I think that is an interesting one. I'll be quicker on a couple of other ones that kind of make the point of applicable use cases, but we're doing a lot in the healthcare payer system and basically billing adjudication. So, kind of aligning hospital codes and how they are disposing of and categorizing work with the payer system, and basically aligning those. There's historically been a lot of errors, right, that result in customer billing problems. They result in under and over billing, on the payer provider side, and they result in a lot of headaches, right, particularly for providers in this case. But we're able to do, effectively anomaly detection, allow people to interact with that data, discover those anomalies quickly, work to remedy them, often before the customer's even engaged. So, that relationship with your data is just so transformative. So I'll leave it at that, but did you give you a couple of practical use cases? So
Excellent. And I think that this is exactly what I'm sure most of us were looking to understand what's happening, what's being transformed within the industries that we're currently working in. Another one, again, I know that you guys are a premier AI solutions provider. There are so many misconceptions today about AI. So from your perspective, maybe Morgan, you might want to take this one. What are some of the misconceptions you're hearing about today?
Yeah, one of the biggest misconceptions we see is just this fear around safety and that your data is being exposed to everyone. And there's no good way to implement a large language model or some of this generative AI capability without exposing your own proprietary data. And that's just not true. Yes, if you went and used a free version of GPT, you could be at risk 100%, but there are many other ways to implement this generative AI without exposing your own private data, without exposing your organization or PII. of individuals. And so there are many ways to interact with large language models that are secure, SOC 2, TLS, that have all the security requirements, required. And so that, I think, is the biggest misconception out there that I continually see, is having that conversation of, well, I can't use it because of the security concern. And once you knock down that security concern, then it really opens up the world, and people are able to, kind of wrap their heads around opportunity and what they can do with this new technology. That's what I'm seeing. Brett, what do you see?
I think that's absolutely the biggest one, Morgan, and the important one. And the other one that I would add is, and this is back to the news and the press and the hype, is this notion of hallucination, right? And you certainly hear about these cases of hallucination, but I think when you apply AI with and I'm not trying to plug us, but with a partner like us, and have the appropriate technology stack and capabilities and the infrastructure around the large language model, right? Including, effectively, a vector database strategy and other key components. You effectively can eliminate that notion of hallucination, right? And get very specific, highly credible answers to the questions you're asking. So I think that hype and fear around hallucinations a little scary. Morgan, you could probably speak more specifically to, how that hallucination's mitigated to the degree it's relevant here, but,
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the way you really mitigate the hallucination is you're able to narrow in your LLM on the documents of interest. And so you're not asking the LLM or generative AI to go and, basically think of everything it's learned, right? So it goes in, it learns everything it knows from, say, the public web. And now you ask it for a response regarding some specific, let's use the technician example, right? Tell me how tight this, how much torque to apply to this bolt. You're not doing that. What you're doing is you're saying, okay, learn a language from, the internet, but then I'm going to give you a document, and you tell me within that document, how tight am I supposed to make this bolt? And so you're not asking for an answer from the, World Wide Web. You're asking for an answer from this very specific document with a very specific prompt. And that's how you're able to eliminate some of that hallucination concern.
Yeah. So Morgan, if you can just take a quick second, because just if someone is new, hallucination may not be a phrase that a lot of people know about. So can you explain what that is, please?
Yeah, thank you for prompting me, no pun intended, on that, Alvin, because I did mean to mention that. Hallucination is making stuff up, right? It's just making stuff up. So if I were to, if you were to ask me a question and I just made something up, and that isn't grounded in, fact and reality, that's what hallucination is. It's just making things up. And you can overcome that by grounding your large language models in the documents of interest.
Hey, Alvin, I like to use an example that to me kind of resonated with me about how hallucinations occur, right, in the broader sphere. And the notion is, let's just say you asked a chat GPT or a large language model, give me a list of the top 10 Super Bowl snack items, okay? And you'll go down a list, and it'll say Doritos and Pringles and whatever, and it'll list down, and then all of a sudden you'll get to an item that says Toyota, right? And you go, and we go, wait a minute, Toyota's not a snack item, right? And if you think about, and Morgan, this is my highly less technical answer than you could kind of give the clarity on this. But if you look at what large language models do, is they correlate, right, pieces of information and ultimately, compile this list. So it pretty easily goes, snack, Super Bowl, key elements, and it goes Doritos, Pringles, and it goes down. But as it works down that list, right, there actually becomes a correlation with other advertisements, right, that are happening during that time. So you and I can look at that quickly and go, Toyota's not a snack, but the AI can be misled, right, in certain circumstances like that. So I'm just making the point of how some of these hallucinations occur, because, you know, and as the models get more mature, and, you know, they'll continue to improve, but those are the things that we can do to help make a model very accurate, right? So
yeah. So excellent. So I think this would just lead us to the next set of questions that we have here. So I know that we're just talking about this whole thing around hallucination and ethics and all of that. So as AI becomes more prevalent in our workspace today, how should companies approach the ethical challenges that they're currently dealing with today? So maybe that could be something that Morgan or Brett, any one of you can take.
Yeah, I can take a first crack at it. And you know, I get really excited by this question. And the reason why I'm very excited about it is I see this as a massive opportunity for organizations to define who they want to be, how they want to help their customers, how they want to help their citizens, as opposed to, concerns over ethics and why we shouldn't do something. I see this on the other side of the coin of this is actually an opportunity to define who we are, how we want to use technology, and how we want to improve people's lives. And so I do see organizations saying, well, hey, I can't do this because I don't understand how, AI is going to impact, bias, right? And I would say, well, that's okay. It's an important question to answer, but I would think of it as what sort of safeguards do you need to put in place, and how do you want to think about bias and define that? You can't sit back and say, I'm not going to do something because I don't understand it, or it's not undefined, or it's undefined. What I would say is, from an ethics perspective, what you need to do is identify, here are the ethical ground rules. Here's the framework that we're willing to play within. It has to be, unbiased, and this is how we measure bias. It has to be transparent, and this is how we define transparency. It has to be audible. This is how we define auditing. If you're able to define those, I think you put yourself in a much better position than leaving them undefined and using that as an excuse of why you can't go forward. And so I think this is a really great opportunity for organizations to look forward and say, what are the beliefs, what are the values that we have, and how do we want to see that represented in our AI, in our automation? And let's go ahead and define that, because if we can define it, we can measure it. And if we can measure it, we can actually see the outcome that we're looking for. So I think it's a massive opportunity to be able to define these things and really, kind of put your money where your mouth is when it comes to what type of organization you want to be. Brett, do you have any thoughts here?
I think that's well said. I think, there's some important concepts in AI. One of them is the notion of transparency and explainability in your models, right? So I think it's really important. And I know later, Alvin, we talked about talking a little bit about talent and training, which we'll get to subsequently. But the important thing there is, I think inside organizations, they're struggling with the depth that is needed to really make a model transparent and explainable. And I think this is, again, I feel like I keep plugging Stellar, but I think this is where we can really help people, because I think understanding, the components of the model, and then having a way that makes that available to the people prompting and inquiring and leveraging that data to understand, so it's not this unknown kind of black box of, hey, I'm asking this question, it goes into this black box, and then I get an answer back, but actually getting a level of visibility, transparency, and explainability to what's happening in the black box. And that's really important to how you set up your framework and set up your technology stack. So,
and if I can just add on to that, I think the other important thing when thinking about ethics, Alvin, is ethics aren't evolving at the same pace that we're seeing technologies evolve. And so if you're able to ground yourself in a solid ethical framework, it gives you something by which to evaluate all these new technologies. The idea of fairness, what does fairness mean? We've got, pretty standard, definitions around what it means to be fair in AI. And that hasn't evolved over the past decade. right? But the technology is rapidly evolving. And so from an ethical perspective, I think the greater risk is not having a well-defined ethics framework by which to evaluate these technologies. And so I see it as more of an opportunity for organizations of being able to define what type of organization they want to be, as well as give them the tools to be able to evaluate new technologies.
Hey, Morgan, can I prompt you on one thing regarding this? And I'm just interested in your thoughts about this, and I'll share how I've thought about it. You know, I think of some of the work that you've done specifically in the recruiting space, right? And you've done a lot of technology enablement in recruiting. And we all know that inherently in recruiting in general, forget the technology side, right? But there's a lot of inherent bias, right? I mean, if you, in its most straightforward terms, right, people tend to recruit people that they have things in common with, and that they, you know, those kind of things. And I think you've done a lot of interesting work of, you know, it's not only removing leveraging technology to remove bias, but it's actually, I think it improves it over human interaction almost. And I'm just curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the way I like to phrase that is this idea that AI is coming and it's going to introduce bias is almost kind of the wrong place to start from. We do have bias in our human processes today. Bias exists. It's just we don't measure it. We don't shine flashlights on this bias. And what AI, automation, data provide us the ability to do is to be able to accurately measure and track bias and try and enforce a system that removes bias. And so it really is this opportunity where we can help make the world better by reducing some of these biases, because they do exist today. And so this premise that we're going to go and introduce AI and the world's going to become more biased, that doesn't have to be the case. We do live in a world with bias today from manual processes. AI gives us the opportunity to track these biases, to define them, and to measure our results against them, our standards. And I think that is a really exciting opportunity. Back to this idea of organizations can choose the type of organization they want to be, the type of values and ethics they want to see, and they actually can do something about it, measure it, and implement it.
Yeah. So I think that's a great point, right? One of the key things that we have seen, a couple of weeks ago, I had the chance to do a presentation for a public sector entity. And one of the key things that we're talking about was trying to look at how they decide on projects, right? Because everybody wanting to be able to start experimenting with this whole space of AI. But I will be curious to understand from your perspective, Morgan and Brett, how are you, I know you do a lot of work with clients, but how are clients deciding on what AI projects they want to work on, which one they want to put on the back burner? If we're supposed to, just give us a gauge as to what they're thinking about, and maybe what are some of the motivations or drivers behind why they want to be able to go in a certain direction. If you can share your perspective on that, it will be greatly appreciated.
I'll take that. First of all, there's no one answer is what I would say. We see different organizations going in different ways. Some organizations are thinking about how can they use AI to reduce costs, improve process. Other organizations are thinking about how can we identify, how to increase revenue. And then you've got other organizations, government, even some large enterprises that are thinking about the customer or the citizen. How do we improve experience for those individuals? So there's no one vanilla approach of how everyone's doing the same thing. It really depends on, the organization size and their vertical and what they're after. But it does come back to a couple of things. First of all, prioritization. So, what is the biggest pain point, and where is there an opportunity that didn't exist, say 3 years ago? And I think that's what's driving a lot of conversations of, look, this technology did not exist 3 years ago. Something's happened, and suddenly I can improve my process, or I can improve that citizen experience. And that's really what's driving the conversation. And then it becomes prioritization around a few things. What's the value it's going to provide? And then also, what's the level of effort to see it implemented? And so I think those are the, just kind of your classic, how do you go about prioritizing projects? But there's no one thing that I think that every organization is doing to evaluate these projects. What's really happening is organizations are seeing a transformative technology that's providing an opportunity that did not exist before, and they're trying to evaluate, is it something I should go after today?
All right, excellent. So,
Hey,
go ahead,
Alvin,
Brett.
I'm just going to add a couple of things to that. One of the things that we're finding with customers, and you hear me, I keep using the notion of the data stack, and what I really mean there, and I'm probably incorrectly using that term, but the way I think about it, at the top of the stack, you've kind of got AI applications, and to some degree, sophisticated analytics right up at the top of the stack. The next layer down, you've got this notion of machine learning models, machine learning operations, right? Algorithms, right? That are sitting on top of your data. And then at the bottom of the stack is your sort of data stack, data warehouse, the sources of data, whether it's transactional systems or an integrated warehouse that you have. And so I think what we find, right, is some customers are well prepared to really jump into some AI applications, right, and leverage the further down the stack machine learning capabilities they have in place and a ready data stack. Some customers are not ready. Morgan and I actually met with a great customer recently that really wanted to focus on data readiness. I think someone actually popped a question here, around that notion as well. And so I think having, a partner like Stellar is helpful because we can assess your data readiness, right? Ready to leverage, move up the stack. If you need work down that stack, we can enable you to, kind of ready that data stack to ensure that you're AI and machine learning ready. And so we work across that stack.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Brett and Morgan. Abby, I think I saw a question that came in. Do we want to take it now, or you want us to wait till the end?
Yeah, I think Brett did just reference that briefly, but the question is, what should an organization with low maturity in data management, quality, integration, et cetera, focus on when looking at implementing an AI solution?
Yeah, let me jump in on that because it's a great question, by the way. And Morgan's got a lot more expertise than I do to kind of add some color here. One of the interesting things that AI and generative AI specifically has unlocked is the ability to kind of take those traditional processes. So if you look at kind of traditional ETL processes, processes for curating and managing your data, now with generative AI, you can actually impact those processes, and I would say actually compress timelines quite significantly. And we're working on some enabling technologies in our data stack to help do that, where you can effectively set up new schemas and organize your data through the power of natural language processing and interacting with your data, which is really transformative, right? So instead of having big teams of 100 contractors, right, which is the common model now for migrating data, deduping and cleaning data, curating data, and all of that, you can actually interact with the data in a new way in natural language, create new data schemas, right? Reposition data and take unstructured data and put it in a structured, format. So I think the interesting thing on that question is, yeah, there's a lot of, in fact, most companies need elements of data readiness in order to leverage AI and work up the stack. But the interesting thing is you can apply AI into that tier of work, and I think you can do it at transformative cost structures, right, in a really different way than the traditional model. So, Morgan, anything to add there?
Yeah, so the thing I would add is, if you look at organizations today, and whether you're mature on, immature, I think it's almost irrelevant where you are in your process, because something has changed, and so no one's really like mature from a generative AI perspective, right? Everyone's kind of struggling with these things. And what I think about is when adopting new technologies, especially new technologies like generative AI, risk is something that governments and large organizations are going to be focused on. What is the risk of this thing? And so how do you bring in and expand the stakeholders? How do you bring, you've got CISOs, CDOs, chief privacy officers, ethical officers, you've got all these individuals with the ability to say no. How do you bring those individuals, get a framework by which you can evaluate these technologies so that you can start taking small bites of the apple? You don't have to have it all figured out to get moving. What you need is a framework by which to evaluate and understand, is this something we can even go after? Is this, does this use PII? Is that is that off limits, or is that acceptable to use a piece of data that has PII in it? Is it acceptable to use even a large language model? And if so, why or why not? And so being able to have that framework by which to evaluate your technologies, I think, is really important. And that's, regardless of what you think your maturity is from a data perspective, that's where I'd almost suggest starting, because everyone's struggling with that. And if you are able to have that framework in place by which to evaluate new technologies, you'll serve yourself well today, but also in the future as well.
All right. So wonderful. So I know there was another question that came in, but just before that, Morgan, if you recall, I think was it 2 weeks ago, we had a chance to engage with a client. And one of the questions that the client posed to us is that, look, I mean, this is all great. We love the whole concept of AI, but how do we measure our return on investment? So if you can speak to that a little bit more, that would be great as well.
Yeah, so return on investment, again, it comes down to how are you approaching, generative AI or AI. Is it something that is very cost basis, right? And if it is cost basis, you're able to do that. Is it, revenue, or is it customer experience? And so it really depends on where you're approaching this conversation. What I would suggest if folks who are just starting to go down this path is don't focus so much on cost optimization. Don't focus so much on optimization of the AI product itself. Go after the big value items so that even if you are off by 50%, there's still a lot of value to be left on the table. And so don't get yourself wrapped up around making sure that this is the most efficient delivery mechanism. Make sure that you're focused on what's the most valuable thing to be working on, where there's the largest opportunity, and then you can worry about optimizing costs afterwards, and you'll already be having value. So my suggestion here is don't get wrapped around the axle on the exact ROI. Identify that huge opportunity, identify something where the time to value makes sense and you can get that quick win, and then you can worry about cost optimization and true ROI measurement afterwards.
Thank you. That was great. Abby, do we want to go with a question that came through?
Yeah, we've got a question. What are your thoughts on using custom apps hosted on new mobile devices like iPhone 15 Pro Max as a vehicle for AI augmented tools that utilize the large neural engines, graphic processors, and computing power, as well as the existing user interface with natural language?
When I think about using things, so are you talking about native applications, Abby? Is it native applications within the iPhone or the Android?
I'm not sure. I think utilizing some of the new features that are. I mean, I know Apple released a whole, big update this week with their AI capabilities and such. So I think kind of across the board.
Yeah, so I think this is somewhere where the answer is when it makes sense, right? So when it makes sense, custom off the shelf is very powerful. So rather than have to build the entire foundation, right? Rather than have to invest in all these graphical processors, how can you use what's out there that's foundationally important? Think of just a frozen large language model. How do you use what's already out there and then be able to fit it to your needs? That is, I think, where you're going to get the most opportunity to extract value, rather than have to recreate the entire, the entire flow, the entire application from scratch. How do you take take things that Meta are developing, that that Apple's developing, Google, AWS, et cetera? How do you identify the really valuable pieces and foundation that they're able to bring to the table, and then make it a little bit of customization a little customization on top of it? So I think that makes a lot of sense. The only thing that, again, I would caution people on is coming back to this idea of a framework. Is it something that you can actually use? And that you have to evaluate, what are the ground rules that you set up as an organization? Are you allowed to use third-party data? Are you allowed to use publicly available data to do these things? That's something that your organization needs to understand. And so while I wholeheartedly would suggest, if it's already developed, find an opportunity to potentially bring it into your system, but only in the cases where that doesn't violate the AI governance framework that you've put in place.
Yeah, hey, I'll add to that, and it's really reiterating, because I think Morgan captured it really well. Look, the big tech players and those tech platforms, they're super important to the ecosystem, and they're certainly to be leveraged. I think it is not well understood, kind of in the common public domain right now, how important. And Morgan, you used the notion of kind of customization, but the notion of, infrastructure outside of those big tech domains is critical to, the quality, the reliability, the transparency, right, of the output that you produce. And I think it's really, really critical, right? And so there's so much more to generative AI than just the large language model itself. And I think understanding that and understanding how those other components so for example, if you are building, as Morgan mentioned, kind of a native app, or you use this notion of technology, technician enablement that I mentioned before, right? Where you can imagine a technician with an iPhone that's getting instructions on how to repair a methane leak. To the notion that they're going to leverage, that app's going to leverage a large language model that's by one of the big tech providers to provide multi-language support and bring certain things to that capability. But then you want the protection of the company's proprietary data, right? And so there's an intersection of that proprietary data with that large language model. And Morgan, earlier you mentioned the notion of some of these data marketplaces. There could be interaction with other third-party data sets, right, that are available to actually curate the right answer while still protecting the proprietary data. So I think, this notion of absolutely, leveraging the big tech capabilities, but the framework of technology around that is super important. And there's a lot of, specific expertise required to mitigate risk, safety, and other things. So.
Yeah, so that's a very good point that you just concluded on, Brett. So the next one that we have over here, and I know we got a few minutes left, so I just want to be sensitive to that, but I'd love to get your perspective. So what kind of skill set are you seeing today that is the most valuable for AI professionals? I'm sure there might be some folks on the call that will be, willing to understand what that means today for them to play in this space. So any one of you want to take that?
I'll let me take a stab at it, and then Morgan can add in here. One of the language that we've been using a lot is, if anyone tells you they're an expert in generative AI, they're probable to lie about other things as well, because the truth is, there's not a lot of experts. It's such a new field. And by the way, there's people that have been working in the field like Morgan 5 or 6 years that have a vast amount of experience. But I think even Morgan would say, I'm not an expert. And we use this language. We're experts in the making, right? We're working hard at it and trying to cultivate and build expertise. So I think that, one, there's not a lot of that there. Now, what there is a lot of history and background in is is, tremendous data science expertise, tremendous machine learning expertise, and tremendous traditional artificial intelligence expertise. And and Morgan, I'm going to speak for you, but when you comment, you've been working in this space for 20 years. Those are the areas, right, of expertise that then now you've kind of brought that into the generative AI domain. So I think that those traditional data science, capabilities are important. The other thing, and not to over pitch Morgan here, but I think this is super interesting, which is, Morgan's unique in that he's a behavioral economist. And the interesting thing when you get into generative AI now, the notion of prompting and those kind of components, you're really intersecting, right, various language skills, various psychology, kind of related human diagnostic capabilities, and this notion of kind of behavioral science. That's an interesting element, right, to overlap the pure tech. I don't know, Morgan, any comments on that piece?
Yeah, my thought here would be, what do we think are the skill sets that are going to be very valuable? And if we look at what's happening, we've got this piece of tech, AI, that's really good at generating recommendations. However, the thing that exists is uncertainty, some uncertainty over that outcome. Is that the right recommendation? Is that the right outcome that we're trying to achieve? And so anything that can add consistency and reliability to these new pieces of tech are going to be really important. And where I see the opportunity is in software engineering. How do you develop processes and software that give consistent and reliable outcome time after time? And so it's really this blend of how do you take individuals from this data science background who understand something about uncertainty and variability and blend it into software engineering to be able to generate not uncertain outcomes, but consistent and reliable outcomes. I think that's one of the big areas of growth. Is I think, yes, there's some concern that some software engineers might be out of jobs, but I think that's just temporary. This is actually going to fuel more software engineering because you're going to need consistency and reliability around these products.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you again, both of you. So just in the interest of time, I think the last question that we have here is around what are the most exciting AI innovation on the horizon over the next 5 to 10 years? I know that's pretty long for us to forecast and try to predict, but give me your best shot. What are you seeing out there that is significantly having profound impact, and we believe that over the next even 3 to 4 years or 3 to 5 years that will significantly revolutionize the way we live, work, and play?
Wow, boy, that's a super hard question, Alvin. I'm gonna give my near term couple quick comments, and then I'll punt this one to Morgan, who's I would give much more of the visionary aptitude here than I do. Yeah, I think this notion of interacting with information in natural language and in a new way is just so transformative. And I think in the next 2 to 5 years, right, of really applying that to company and enterprise data in a new way. I just think there's so much opportunity for innovation, and as Morgan mentioned, across all domains, right? Whether you're in HR, whether you're in finance, right? Whether you're in marketing and sales, right? I just think that the use cases are just so abundant, right? That there's going to be just continue to be new use cases emerging there. Morgan, I'll punt a little bit of the 5 to 10 year vision to you. And
well, I guess I'll answer a slightly different question around what's getting me very excited over the next 5-10 years. I think it's creativity. And what this technology is going to allow creative folks to be able to do, we haven't been able to see before. Because you're going to be able to take that person with a really creative and revolutionary idea to express that idea and to be able to generate an outcome, whereas before it took many different individuals to put that all together. And so I think the huge opportunity for generative AI, the huge opportunity that we're seeing out there with some of these new tools is really it's providing tools to creative individuals to give us things we haven't thought of before. And so it's a really hard question to ask of what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. Well, we've got to go and talk to the really creative folks because they're thinking of things that I don't know, and they're going to actually be able to do them with these tools. They're going to be able to automate. So, I've got this idea for a new software. Let me tell a machine about my idea. Let me tell the machine about what the outcome I want is, and it's going to be able to write that software for me. That is really interesting, and I think that's where we're going to see this massive innovation occur. Not because we're just writing better software, but because we're giving the tools to the people with the ideas and the creativity. They don't have to go and have a 20-year background in software development. They're able to actually do software development, that MVP, a lot quicker, then bring in the experts to make it reliable. I think that's what I'm really excited about. And I think that's what we're going to see over the next 5, 10 years is creative people are going to be starting more businesses. Creative people are going to be coming up with more ideas, and you're actually going to see those implemented.
Yeah.
Hey, the one thing, Alvin, I'll layer on to that. I think that's so well said, Morgan, but I think the interesting thing is we get focused on kind of the outcomes and outputs, right, from generative AI and what's capable of. But where the human's going to always bring enormous value and is so critical to the whole ecosystem is asking the right questions. And Morgan, that's what you were getting at, right? Is the creative that can actually prompt the right questions and ideate and iterate on the answers, right, to ultimately get to the outcome. And sometimes we overlook the notion of asking the right questions, and so there's a human in the loop for the long haul that I think's super relevant. So
Absolutely. Wow, I can't believe it. Our hour has just ran up so fast. I mean, what a fascinating conversation here. So once again, thanks to all of you. Brett, Morgan, thank you again for your participation. Looking forward to this wonderful partnership.
Thanks again, Brett and Morgan. This was fantastic and a lot covered here. I know we've got another a similar event coming up in October, so we'll continue to talk through a lot of this good stuff. And if anybody does have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks again, everyone, so much for joining. Alvin, thanks so much for hosting us. This has been fantastic.
All right. Thanks, Abby. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Morgan. And thanks to all of you who are participating and joining us today. Have a wonderful day now. Thanks to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
thanks a lot.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.